great. Well, let's come back to the idea of mentoring and what makes a good mentor. What do you see as the qualities of a good mentor so that people who maybe feel I'd sounds like something I'd like to do, but I'm not sure I'm good enough or whatever it might be that's holding them back?
Well, that's a difficult question also. You pose some deep questions. I would say a good mentor is someone who has a good character. And my measure of a good character might be summarized in the following way. Uh, Values, integrity, honesty, sincerity, love, courage, humility, compassion, values such as those. I had the good fortune of one time meeting the head, the president of Toastmasters International. I think her name was Johnson. I'm not sure if I remember the name right. But she came to Toronto and I went to a meeting. The funny part of the meeting was I didn't know who she was and I didn't know all the people in the room, but they were sitting and they were already in the meeting. And as I came in, they sort of said, "Oh, Andy, come on in." And I started shaking heads. And I mistook one of the other people in the room for the president. I was talking to this other person. And only then I realized, oh, no, she's not the president. This person's the president. So I made a complete idiot out of myself. But anyway, I wanted to ask her this question. Uh, you're a leader of an international organization. Uh, what is it? What is one of the key values or characteristics that define what is a great leader? And she said, I'll never forget this. That she just came up with one. She said, humility,
Mm.
humility. And I thought, wow, humility. I wouldn't have never, if I were asked, I would have never come up with that answer. But I think she's right. Humility is a big deal in our life. So those were some of the values, that I hope I listed humility in my values. I think I did. But those are the kind of values that I would look for in a person. And like, for example, in my own life, I have certain priorities, and I'll share now these may not be your priorities, they're my priorities, but that was one value scale. Another one in my life is God, family, career, and community. Those are the four areas that I try to focus on in that order, in that priority. So, if someone else has those characteristics, it's another measure for me of what is a good mentor. Um, I met a guy named Danilo Semotiuk. As a matter of fact, I spent 15 years working on his case. He was in the Soviet Union, the world's longest imprisoned prisoner of conscience back when the Soviet Union was around. Served over 40 years in concentration camps. And ultimately, he was released in 1987 and he came to Canada and I got him. So I had a chance to meet with him and talk to him about values. And I asked him, like, now just to share, who this guy was. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel to the American Bar Association convention in San Francisco with him, where he was to speak to a panel of lawyers, human rights lawyers, about what's going on in the Soviet Union with other Soviet dissidents that were at the meeting and giving evidence as well. But to show you what kind of person he was, we came to the meeting slightly late. The meeting had already started, and there were there was probably a dozen Soviet dissidents, all who had served at least 7 years, 10 years, or whatever, in concentration camps, giving evidence. And they're all in the room, and there's up at the front, there's a table with all these prominent human rights lawyers from from the American bar. And when we entered the room, as he entered the room, I came in after him. All the dissidents stood up as if so, just like they were automated to stand up as they recognized him because he was the longest in prison, prisoner of conscience. A prisoner of conscience is someone who is in prison not because he's a criminal or because he did something wrong, but because he holds or she holds an opinion that's different or contradictory to the opinions of the leadership of a country. So anyway, he was a political prisoner. And in the course of my relationship to him, I asked him, how does a guy spend 40 years in concentration camps without breaking? Like what was it about you that made it different than everybody else who broke and confessed and signed phony confessions and admitted their guilt and all that stuff? And he said, it's very simple. He said, in many cases, the people value carnal values higher than spiritual values. Carnal values, things like physical comfort, safety, like sex, food, clothing, whatever, higher than spiritual values, like your integrity, your honesty, your decency. But in my case, he said, I was not prepared to compromise my spiritual values for anything. Now, very few of us are going to be as strong a character as the Semotiuk was. But I don't know if I could be that strong. But I'd like to think that I do value spiritual values, like he said, higher than carnal values. And again, if you're looking for a mentor and you see a guy like Danilo Semotiuk, I'd follow him, man. So that's the best I can do.